Thanks, Kate. And just to clarify, I'm not the co-founder of Galileo. Actually, Kelly, who is in the audience, is. I'm on the founding team. I joined about 2 years ago, and prior to that, my now 12-year-old twin girls and I, we've been traveling and world schooling and basically being a digital nomad family for the past 5 years. I had also traveled a lot pre-kids, and now I'm helping Vlad and Kelly and the whole team revolutionize education for families like ours, as well as families who are stationary. So it's not just for nomadic families, but especially very good for nomadic families. So maybe Vlad can elaborate a little bit more about Galileo, and then we can jump back and talk about it later. So I'd like to pass this on to Vlad.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I've been to dentist today, so maybe my voice is not perfect, but I'll do my best. So yeah, I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Galileo, which is practically a school, but soon we'll have some other services, learning services and educational services for people. And indeed, we designed this for remote families, for families that would like to have some sort of like independence, like have a lifestyle which is more location independent. And we started this 2.5 years ago, and this is going pretty well. I think most of the families they love the approach. We changed, we redesigned everything from scratch. So imagine like a school redesigned from scratch. Kind of ignoring completely what traditional education system is right now. So and very beneficial for students. And now we're introducing this hybrid model, which is practically online and in person. In person, practically it's a platform where we can enable entrepreneurs or edupreneurs to launch micro businesses, micro schools, and connect and use our online infrastructure and to deliver world-class education. So I'm not an expert in traveling and taxes and remote, but I'm as you initially stated, I'm a father. I have 2 boys. I lived in different countries. I'm trying to have a location independent, like as much as possible. I deal myself with all these issues, like taxes and all the other things that we'll probably discuss today. So yeah, that's about me, and I'm looking forward for this pretty interesting conversation. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, indeed. Listen, thanks very much for having me on today. Looking forward to the discussion, and I find, with these kind of discussions, you learn so much from the other panelists, and also often from the audience as well. To be honest, there's a great community. People are very open-minded around this, and I find I'm learning something new every single day about different aspects of remote work and managing this and making it happen. Let's say so. I guess my own background is 10 years in the corporate career and 5 years in the startup world. The 10 years in corporate career, did 3 years in the Big Four in Deloitte, and then did 7 years in CRH, a FTSE 100 listed company. Did everything you can imagine around the finance side of it, finished off being the senior finance leader of a €4 billion division. Absolutely loved it. The biggest thing about it for me was getting to meet these different cultures and travel around the world. So I traveled to 150 locations around Europe alone in that kind of 10-year period. Absolutely loved it. And for me, I guess at that stage then, the reason I got into finance was because I kind of saw it like the language of business. I was very interested in entrepreneurship from the get-go, and I kind of using finance to understand that side of it. And so what happened was I decided to do my own startup in the travel industry called Culture Me. It was basically a digital app to help you navigate other cultures, bringing intercultural models and research into the travel industry. Absolutely loved it. It was a very interesting experience. Won Best Travel Technology Product in the World at the Global Youth Travel Awards in 2018. Pivoted to business travel, stopped the app, launched as an API, and then, of course, business travel got completely blown to pieces. So a humbling moment then for us as a family, because I did it with my wife, Dee. But at that stage, we'd gained so much life experiences. We had been digital nomads ourselves. We lived abroad in Asia. Our daughter, Rosa, she's 4 now. She's the eldest, and she's already been to 23 countries. And it was the most life-changing experience for us as parents and for Rosa, seeing all these different cultures. And to be honest, we cannot wait to get back traveling again. And so then what happened is early this year I came up with the idea of the Work from Anywhere team, which is basically a global marketplace of tax advisors to help individuals or companies make remote work or digital nomad life a reality. And that's basically the idea behind it. And when we did the research, what we found was two really interesting insights when we surveyed both companies and individuals. Was that tax was the biggest pain point for companies. That's the reason they say no to remote work abroad in many cases. It's also the number one pain point for individuals, the ones we surveyed. That was one of the reasons we decided to go ahead with this. But what was also fascinating was that the number two pain point for individuals was actually kids' education. And if you can imagine, not everyone we would have surveyed was a parent. And so, really for parents, what we're seeing, and it's a consistent theme, is that basically kids' education is a major, major pain point. So for me, I'm looking forward to learning more about this discussion and hearing more about the likes of Galileo, and love what you're doing as well, Kate, with the Family Workation, and of course Andrew as well. Great to be chatting again with the work you're doing with Insured Nomads, and of course being a digital nomad parent yourself. So looking forward to being part of today's talk.
Why, yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you all today. I see so many faces and people that I look forward to having a coffee with in the coming years. I've made some wonderful friends here, and together to be in this room, it's a pleasure. In 1996, I recall, and some of you have heard this, stepping out of a Virgin Megastore. That's when you bought actually hard music and didn't stream it. And grabbing my journal and writing that there's not a country I don't want to visit. And wanted to marry someone that would travel the world with me. And I ended up marrying a doctor who wanted to move to Africa. Took us a while to figure out which country, but she later specialized in travel medicine, and I had finished university, gotten into healthcare administration. We then moved to Ghana, raised our kids for about 4 years in Ghana, West Africa. For the last 20 years, we've lived and worked across 4 continents. We have done almost every type of schooling, from having a teacher travel with us to online, to local, to private, to international, to public school, and shipped containers. I've coordinated a container where 5 families have had their stuff in it, including a car, to just my own, and to just relocating with what's in our suitcases. And there's so many things when the subtitle here is the logistics. There's so much from the insurance, the risk management, the pension, the taxes, the education. There's so many things in logistics. So I look forward to seeing where this topic will go as we cover this. And I hand it back to you, Kate. Thank you again for the opportunity.
I think one of the things, Kate, that jumps out straight to mind is just the different profiles of travelers emerging. So, prior to pandemic, you had location independent, a very small part of the travel market. You had then, let's say, the traditional digital nomads of young people going from one country to the next, not spending maybe more than 30 days and going in on leisure travel visas, maybe doing a bit of work, not declaring the taxes. And then, that was pretty much. What's fascinating now, speaking to, I was reading an article where Gonzalo Hall was speaking on the trends that he's seeing. And basically in Startup Madeira, to give you an example, pre-pandemic, corporate nomads were, maximum 10% of all of the remote workers coming to Madeira, whereas now it's more 50-50. So it is fascinating, this massive growth in remote workers who want to travel abroad. And actually a lot of them are employed by a company. So they're employed by a company, they might have a home base, they want to go abroad for maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months, for example. And my own suspicion is that once travel restrictions begin to release, beginning of early next year, I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of profile. So it'll be interesting to see the growth in the different profiles between the corporate nomads, then there's corporate homads, people that stay at home, for example, independent, let's say, location dependent digital nomads, and the different profiles that are going to start emerging, because I think that there's going to be a lot of movement here over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yes, COVID has brought front that education doesn't have to be traditional, that work doesn't have to be traditional, that benefits don't have to be tied to the local health plan, that everything can be thought from a fresh perspective and looked at differently. And community has to be viewed differently. We actually have to wake up and talk to our neighbors now and the people that we're around, because we're tired of being shut up in our homes. So this new awakening of what we're going to become, how we're going to travel the world, how we're going to treat each other is good for the global population. And I look forward to seeing how education is reformed, how finance is reformed, all these things. So one of these things with Galileo taking a forefront in leading the technological advancement of education, I applaud you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to mention that, Galileo launched pre-pandemic, and we were initially targeting, the world schooler families, the digital nomad families, or, homeschoolers, unschoolers who wanted something more, and expat families. But because of COVID, I think a lot of people realized that they could, obviously work from home. They don't have to fight the commute and go into the corporate office or wherever they are. And there's tons of people who are realizing that they don't have to continue to work for the big corporation. So they're starting to go off on their own and start their own business or become freelancers. And we're trying to show them that, not only can you work at home, and a lot of people are leaving the cities and moving to a more rural area. As long as they have internet, they can work. But we're trying to convince them that you can also leave your state, your country. You can go to a different time zone possibly. And often what's holding them back is the school for their kids. And hopefully they will realize that there's many different ways to learn. And obviously with Galileo's online program, that's much easier to do. My kids and I, we started with Galileo when we were living in Mexico. And then during the pandemic, we decided to move to Tbilisi, Georgia, many hours away. And we still had the consistency of a Galileo with us. My kids did have to change to a different cohort. We have 3 different cohorts around the world because most of the learning sessions as of now are live on Zoom. And then we came back to the US for a bit. So we switched again, but again, we had the consistency of the whole Galileo program and community. And in less than a week, we're heading to Spain. So again, we're hopping back and forth to different continents. And the project that I'm working on is to, as Vlad mentioned, is to connect with existing micro schools, self-directed learning centers, world school hubs, agile learning centers, or helping them launch. So my kids and I are going to Spain and Portugal because we've got a bunch of them launching in that area. And, some families are fine to have their kids learn 100% online. Others prefer to be 100% in person. And for my family, we think that having the hybrid of both online and in person in the same center, the same day, is probably the best combination for us. So anything is possible. And, luckily there's, really interesting companies coming out and growing because of the pandemic and because families are, changing their lifestyles and redesigning the way that they live and helping their kids grow up to be global citizens, which I think is incredibly important in today's day and age. Thanks. Perhaps Vlad can answer, maybe,
Yeah,
since he's
I would
more of
like
a.
to. I'd like to start with one small experiment I'm running actually right now. So I had this, this question in my mind. Is like at some point you need to have some sort of like a base, a house, a place where you can call home, right? So this is so embedded in everyone's mind that is like kind of like, almost forcing you to buy a house at some point, especially if you have kids and stuff like this. But lately, like looking at like how the world would look like, I said like, so the experiment I'm actually running right now is like I said, what if instead of buying a house, and the experiment is like very simple. If you have to buy a house, let's say $500,000 in Spain, where I live, right? So this is the average price, let's say for a house, and you have to put like down payment of $100,000. The rest will be a credit. This is like, the traditional family probably around the world, but let's say in Spain. And instead of doing this process, and having a house and a base and a home, what if I actually buy Airbnb stocks and actually I can use this as an investment for long term. And my assumption right now is actually this will be much more profitable than buying a house. I'm doing this experiment right now, so probably we'll know the result in a couple of years. But so far, it's actually pretty good, right? So the Airbnb stock went a little bit up since I started this. So instead of like thinking about like buying a house, you have to do is like and this will kind of like give you actually force you to be in one place. Why not like trying to make investments on companies that are more scalable, are like they really have a chance maybe to go even like 100x. I don't know, like a house probably. I mean, if a house will go 100x, the price for a house will go 100x, maybe there is something wrong with the economy. But some companies can be so interesting and so powerful. And I guess like if you look from this perspective, this gives you a lot of freedom. Now having all these options like cryptocurrencies and all these things as assets to invest in as well, I think people will have more and more freedom. And I think the most like the most productive people on the world, on the planet, like they will be invited by some regions, countries to live there because they can produce and bring more value. So having this in mind, I think is like if I'd like to develop a skill, is like, hey, what kind of value can I add, and how can I make my life as flexible as possible? Because I think the future is very interesting for the creators and the makers, and having this flexibility will really help you thrive even more. So I know this may sound like a very radical way of looking at life, but I think I think in kind of like this may be an interesting future, right? So I also have a mom now, so she lives in a pretty remote area in Romania. So I was like thinking, yeah, she has a house, like like all the traditional thinking, but now she feels so alone. And I said, well, what if you actually can live in a different, and I've seen another company, for example, in the US building a platform for old people where actually it's a community and you go and live in very good conditions and you meet people your age and based on interest and everything. So I think if you really stop and start thinking about what is the best for you as a family and how to optimize your life, I think we'll see some big changes in the future, like in the near future, maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 years. So because of that, like the infrastructure that you need to build is much more softer. It's like it's probably the businesses will be online first, like the way we design the school and everything. But yeah, with some sort of like connection with the real world, that's like in person and stuff like this. I don't know if this was like the answer for the question, but I thought it was like anyways, like worth to share this thought I have. So.
I wanted to say something really quickly, and then hopefully Andrew and John can get involved. But for me, the big difference between being nomads versus an expat is you typically need some type of residency visa in the country that you're going to be moving to or staying at. My kids and I don't do that. We just leave whenever our visa runs out. But I would imagine, as a nomad, we would use something like the insurance that Andrew offers. But if you were stationary, we might try to buy local insurance. So maybe Andrew can mention kind of the difference of that. And we've done both when we've used travel insurance, and we've also used local insurance. But legally things are different whether you're passing through that area for a few months or if you're living there for a while, in regards to tax, insurance, and other things. So maybe Andrew and John could mention that a little bit more.
Yeah, there's so many logistical things. It's a good question on the insurance because, travel insurance is kind of meant for a trip. And many times people are considering this as a lifestyle. And so if you're going to have a home base versus more nomadically, from a base, you can get a national plan. But on entry, countries are requiring you to show that you have a policy that complies with their regulations, that you're not going to be a liability to their socialized system or to their hospitals, leaving a bill for a broken neck and paralyzed and they're staying in their bed for weeks. But so looking at the local options, but also taking care of the intermediate until you qualify for it, which I know for Portugal, it may take 6 months. And they require proof for that visa process that you have an expat health plan versus a travel insurance policy. And having a travel insurance policy that actually covers the things of your lifestyle, if you are an adventure sports nut, or making sure that there's coverage for emotional health and things like that. But I think of back to your question, Kate, on the logistics. One of the differences is if you're doing this with a fixed home base, you don't have to think about your mail as much as someone who's more transient and moving from place to place. And something like Anytime Mailbox, where you can choose an address in Belgium or in the Caribbean, China, US, Canada, etc., and they scan your mail for you. You read it and determine if it can be shredded or recycled or forwarded to you anywhere in the world, even if it's forwarded to a family member for safekeeping. Very similarly with DutchMailer.com, if you wanted to use something in the Netherlands, and their Earth Class Mail, which they'll even deposit checks for you if it arrives in your mailbox. And those are available all over. And that's one of the things I highly recommend is to have your banking go to an address such as that. Because if they realize you're living outside the country, in some jurisdictions, they'll close your bank account even. And so having a real address through a service like Anytime Mailer or Earth Class Mail and the similars is a good logistical aspect. But I urge you all to also leave a power of attorney document with someone who's not traveling. Leave your will, a copy of your will, but with someone that's not traveling with you, because that's the worst thing is that, sadly, since I'm in risk management, I face the things where the parents are out running errands, the kids stayed in the Airbnb, and parents were killed. Who is it that knows who's to take care of the kids in the worst case scenario? Who has that power of attorney? And so the logistics when you're crossing borders in this lifestyle of people knowing where your schedule is, using a service that has an emergency call center that even knows where you are with GeoIP tracking. That's part of our service at Insured Nomads, is that every policyholder has access to our crisis response technology that is an easy on-off with tracking and a panic button to speak to medical and security and safety folks. But having that backup plan and having copies of documents with someone who's not traveling, that itinerary, at least rough itinerary, with someone else is a smart idea.
Yeah, great tips there, Andrew. I guess on the taxes side, maybe better to just take a kind of a helicopter view for a second. I was reading a report there recently that digital nomads have gone from 7 million pre-pandemic to 12 million post-pandemic. I think that's the classical definition of digital nomads. But actually, if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, there are about 1 billion knowledge workers in the world. According to Gartner, by 2025, about 51% of them will be remote. And how many of that, let's say 500 million, are going to be working remotely abroad? You can take a guess, it's probably going to be a fairly sizable number. So all of a sudden, we go from a situation pre-pandemic where you literally had a handful, 1.2 billion travelers every world, of which only 7 million were digital nomads. You can imagine for the tax authorities, it wasn't really an interesting number, was it? And so that's why, we've had cases of people that came to us and said, I haven't been paying my taxes. Had a US LLC, been working in Southeast Asia for the last 5 years, haven't paid any taxes, haven't declared to the local tax authorities. How can I sort this out? And that's something that you could get away with. It certainly wasn't advisable, but you could get away with to a large extent pre-pandemic. I think the difference now is twofold. First of all, there's going to be a lot more digital nomads or remote workers working remotely abroad. And the other thing that's also been massively accelerated with the pandemic is the acceleration of digitalization. So, for example, if you take India have digitalized their whole visa process, for example. So their whole database is now digitalized, whereas before it was all paper-based. The same thing, for example, for taxation authorities. If you find in many countries, which is happening now, that the tax databases can speak to the visa and immigration databases, all of a sudden digital nomads can come up much more of a risk. And so what we're also seeing is certain countries, like for example in the UK, they're actually establishing task forces to go after remote workers coming in. And why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because it's a lot more people coming in, it's a movable feast, and it's a lot more tax revenue they could potentially capture. So I guess the lesson is that I think the days of just going from country to country and not thinking about it, you can still do it. And if you don't earn a huge amount, well, I guess the downside probably won't be massive in terms of fines potentially. But at the end of the day, it's becoming more and more of a risk. And in certain countries, at the end of the day, if you are caught evading taxes, you will be jailed. So I think the risk factor has definitely gone up. And what you find is certain countries are more stricter than others. I guess when it comes to taxes and the legal side and insurance, things like that, I think what's really important is that you at least have a strategy in place of, okay, where is going to be my kind of administrative hub or primary hub? You can still travel all around the world. You can you can explore the world in so many different ways, but it is helpful to have one hub. I'll give you an example, and this is actually Andreas, who's on the call, actually told this to me recently, actually, that I think is in Portugal. Capital gains for crypto are taxed on a remittance basis. So that's fascinating. It means you can actually be, in Portugal, you could make crypto gains, and they actually, if you don't remit them, they won't be, they won't be taxed. But you can have other countries where, for example, let's say you're passing through a particular country and you might have crypto gains, for example. Let's say if you decide to sell a bunch of your crypto assets, you'll trigger a capital gains liability. If that is picked up by the taxation authorities, then straight away you can have a significant liability. And as we all know, the country rates for capital gains or for income tax or whatnot, they really do vary significantly from country to country. So I guess the key message really is just whatever your plans are, at least have it well thought through and just think of the implications, because in some countries the residency days are literally 30 days, whereas in other countries they're more than 300. But there's also other factors at play here as well. There's additional regulation, like for example in Europe, there's a thing called Posted Worker Directive. You might not have even heard of it, but for example, if you're going to, let's say for example, a construction site in Austria and you don't have a Posted Worker Directive certificate, you won't be even allowed access to it. So there's various different rules and risks you've got to watch out for, which I guess it just makes sense to plan this stuff in advance, because the days of kind of roaming around and not declaring to the local authorities, you can still try that. It's just a lot riskier now. So having a well thought out plan is really critical from multiple perspectives, from the individual income tax, social security, for corporation tax. If you have a company, that can definitely play a factor. Employment law, we're seeing contractor misclassification. A lot of companies used to go and hire people by hiring them as a contractor abroad, whereas that's being pulled back now because of contractor misclassification risk. Why? Because a lot of countries are basically saying, look, even though the contract might say it's a contractor to the company, you're essentially working as an employee, and all of a sudden that triggers a whole bunch of additional fees and social security elements and whatnot that come into place, and legal elements for the company. So we're seeing those sort of aspects come down much more stricter now than before. So there's some of the things that would jump to mind.
For me, because I had traveled a lot before I had kids, the main goal was for me to just show them the world and have them grow up to be global citizens versus staying in the same town and getting sucked into the whole American consumerism and that type of lifestyle. So we have not stayed in one place a long time, except we were in Mexico for 14 months due to COVID. But typically, I try to stay in a place that gives us a decent visa, 3-month visa or 6-month visa. We were recently in Tbilisi, Georgia. They give you a year, but then after 6 months, they want you to start paying taxes. So that's one of the reasons why I left, because I didn't want to have to deal with that headache. But for us, I think if I did not have kids, I might be an expat. But because I have kids, we're nomadic and we're just traveling as long as they want to keep doing it. One of my girls loves this lifestyle. The other one misses home once. And so that's why we come back to the States once in a while to see grandma. But, I don't know. We're still traveling. We've been doing it for 5 years and there's so many other places we want to see. And I can't even figure out if we settle down somewhere where that would be. And every time we go to a new place, we kind of imagine, can we stay here for a while? Can we stay here permanently? For now, we may make Spain and Portugal our base during the spring and fall because of the Schengen rules. We have to leave. We'll be in Bulgaria and other places during the winter and summer. But for us, if we're in a place a long time, we start getting kind of bored. But the downside is then we have to say goodbye to all the friends that we made while we were there. And this is why, again, the Galileo dojos, the learning centers that we're partnering with, we may start visiting the same ones over and over again to have at least part-time the advantage of being with the same group of people every so often. So everyone does it differently. I think a lot of people, they initially go someplace quote unquote safe. Like a lot of people will go to Costa Rica first or Mexico because it's nearby, like Merida, Mexico, really safe places. And then they kind of use that as a base and start traveling abroad. Or they go to Europe, because Europe is a little bit more, people feel a little bit more safe. But, whatever every family is different. Some are new to traveling, so they kind of tiptoe into it. There are World School hubs. There are sometimes World School conferences that they go to, or like some type of family conference where they go to meet other families. That's a good way to start. There's a bunch of social media groups that you can join and learn about this. But I would say that for us, we're still fairly nomadic every few months. But other people may feel comfortable staying in one place for a year. But then for me to stay for a year, I have to figure out residency. I have to figure out, what kind of tax do I have to pay? And then, trying to find local insurance. So I actually think it's easier to be nomadic, even though we have to hop on planes and travel a little bit more.
If I could play sound effects here, I'd have sirens going off. It's that as a young parent with elementary age children, it's so much easier to be nomadic. It's so much easier to have shorter bursts in different places. And now that I have university age kids that have come of age to say, okay, there were positives and negatives about this. And I have high school and junior high that are saying, okay, you thought you were giving us the grass is greener, experiencing the cultures. And yes, we loved it then, but there's so much zeal with the young entrepreneur, the young business person with small children saying, we can do this. It's just an extra suitcase and they're in the backpack on our back or our front back. And that's great. But we have to understand the effect it has on the kids, positive and the radically potentially harmful effect of not having the roots that everyone else has. There are wonderful advantages of being borderless and traveling the world as a family. But every child is unique. Every child processes that differently. And our first priority in life has to be the mental health of our children as well. Not our careers, not our love for travel, but our love for each other. And that's got to ring true to our kids. And the fabulous places, the ice cream, the communities the parents enjoy may not be the best for one certain child. So it's a thing that we've got to have in mind. And I'll know a lot of this is dealing with young parents. And so I'm the old guy in the room, almost hitting 50. So I just have to have those virtual sirens going off just briefly here.
Yeah, Andrew, I do agree. But this is why I have my kids vote whether or not we keep going. You may have heard of the term third culture kid. I guess I was kind of one of them because I grew up in Korea for a bit and then back to the States. So I think there's some families who have kids who have no choice where they move to, whether they're a third culture kid because mom or dad had a new assignment, or they work for the government, or they're in the military. For us, I think a difference is, my kids do have a choice. We do talk about it, whether or not we want to keep going, or whether we want to settle down. And if they do want to settle down, we will find a place and that works for us and do so. Because I do agree, it's the kids come first.
Yes, and sometimes we've certainly done that with kids having a choice, but sometimes they're not of the emotional age to be making those kind of life decisions as well. And sometimes hindsight is a better gauge on whether or not we as parents made the right decision. and it's a fun adventure doing this with kids. Love it.
I got air horns as well over here. Andrew and Liz love it. I mean, even Rosa now, even 2 years later, since we came back from Thailand, I mean, she can still do the Thai greeting, and you can see it left such an impact on her. And I feel so sorry for our middle child. I've got three at the moment. We've got Rosa's 4, Esme who's 2, and Barra who's 5 months. But Esme's 2, and she's hardly travelled at all. Obviously, with the pandemic over this part of the world, but we're going to make it up to her. She's going to get going soon enough.
Yeah, quickly, my girls, when we come home to visit my mom for a while in Seattle, one of them told me after being home for 3, 4 months that she was world sick versus being homesick. She wanted to get out there in the world again. So I thought that was cute.
I'd like to jump on this because I think this is a very, like it's a very individual, problem where way of looking at the problem, because I think everyone should ask as a family where, as a parent, is like, why are you doing this? It's like, what is the main reason? What is the purpose for this? And why do you want to optimize your life this way? And once you have this, like a very solid answer, I think is like, then, for example, some of the people will do this because they want to expose their kids to different cultures. And for them, this is one of the most important things you can offer to your kids. Uh, for some others, like just because like, hey, I cannot find my people in my city, so I just need to move to a different location because I think where I live now, it's not my place, where I don't feel like I'm belonging here. So I think once you have this question, like we'll answer, like once you have this answer for this question, I think this will help you a lot. In my case, I think the most interesting thing that I can offer to my kids is actually to expose them to different cultures so they can understand the world is it's a bigger place. They will understand about. I was born in a very small city in a country which I was like completely isolated because of communism. I was born in Romania, so for me, the desire to know more about the world was like really big from, and kind of like blocked because of communism, right? So when I was able to travel at 18, I was like, gone. I wanted to know everything about everything. So and then I realized like how big of an impact this kind of stuff had on my life, and I decided to optimize my life in a way now to offer the same thing for my kids. So I think this is one very important stuff. But I also have a question for Andrew, right? Because I think like one of the blockers for people to travel, like actually have a couple of them. It's like we have one thing that keep you grounded is like, of course, the job. Now the jobs are more and more remote. The second one will be the school. Now you have Galileo, and those, I think probably will have more other, like a couple of other options very soon. And the last one is actually the health system, right? So it's like, can you go and live in a place where you don't have access to the same doctors, the same, the same facilities and everything? How do you see this problem actually solved, Andrew? And like, what's your view on this? Because probably, being connected with, with insurance, you probably have to deal more with, health issues.
Yes, and this is one of the things, just as education must be reformed, insurance and finance must be reformed as we face this new global workforce. Insurance is regulated in every jurisdiction, every country. And so there is not a generic answer because in that application, even though you don't have to notify us compared to some of our colleagues in the industry for international health insurance, if you change countries, you have to notify them and the premium can change because we have to emit premium tax to certain countries if someone is living there as a long-term citizen. And you have to qualify for local plans a lot of times, or you at least have to understand it, or be willing to fight through customer service in a language you may not speak if you do actually get a local plan and have instances. But of course, in this facing health insurance or health issues around the world, many times folks want to venture into this lifestyle when they have a child that has a pre-existing condition. And that's going to be excluded on most insurance until you are able to get into a local system. But it's not worthwhile to get into a local system unless you're going to stay long-term in a country. And long-term isn't likely if you haven't experienced it already. And okay, we're going to make that a base for a number of years. So that's kind of off the topic of the room, because this is, as Kate was saying, we're talking about staying short-term in locations. So transferring that risk of, what if a chronic illness is diagnosed? Well, travel insurance doesn't cover that. What if we have a child unexpectedly, or we get married, meet someone on the road and get married and have a kid? That's not covered on travel insurance. But because it's marketed many times as, oh, get travel insurance, it's cheap. It's often secondary to whatever you have continuing back in your home country or subsidized in Canada or Israel or wherever. Those plans, and fly you back home for that to care for you when you really don't want to fly home because you're traveling with your family. So there's so many intricacies, and it's a thing of, okay, let's get to specific questions. And this is so critical that we address them and have the people to ask, but yet we almost avoid it because insurance is complex. So let's just don't ask any questions at all. But it's so vital. I've seen claims hit 130,000 euro, and it's a thing of, glad we spent $5,000 a year on it. But it's that thing of, we probably won't need it. Well, we wouldn't say that to insuring our phone or insuring our car or a rental car, because we value those things, but apparently we don't value our health or our life enough to actually spend what it's worth to insure it. So yes, it's a tough thing to delve into that, Vlad. And each question is so specific for each long-term plan and family situation.
But do you see any possible, solutions out there, like someone trying to solve this or fix this, or?
Yes, as in my hand is way up in the air. Yes, I am. And payment, when someone does get care, is one of the worst things in our industry. Is even with the most expensive health plans, it's often reimbursement based. And having a policy ID card that's a piece of plastic or a PDF that just has a logo and a policy number and a phone number doesn't really help somebody. So having it connected to the MasterCard network so it's easy to get payment is one of the things we've done to simplify this process, but also working with our capacity partners to say, okay, we've got to change with the seasons. One of those is so you don't have to notify us when you move from country to country. And normally pregnancy costs a fortune more. With us, it's 50 euros more a year to add in maternity benefits. And it's not a 12-month waiting period. Things like that. We've got to change how it works. And with us, it's got to have, working through in every jurisdiction what it's going to take to make it work there. We've got a long road ahead, though, just due to regulatory issues. There's one thing a topic that I'd like to bring up today, and I'm not sure if we're hitting the top of the hour or what the cutoff is on this, Kate. So I'll ask you that before I broach the topic. Wonderful.
I'm back here now with the question if the network is better.
Yeah, we could hear you. I believe we could. Go for it, Daphne.
Thanks. Sorry. So earlier it was just a bit of a bad timing. Actually, I'm traveling now with my partner and my 2 kids. We are in Canada. We're based in Berlin. And our 2 kids are younger than 5 now. The oldest is 3, the other one is 2 months. And we're really liking hearing you, Andrew, and Liz, your stories about how you are traveling with kids and the schooling and making it work. So we were actually in the car and thinking, we want to hear more about how you're making it work to be able to move between countries as they are growing up.
Now with the learning dojos, the Galileo learning dojos that are popping up around the world, and today we just they had a grand opening at one. The idea is for the families who are enrolled in Galileo or not, but world schooler families, they can hop around the world visiting these local learning dojos and get completely immersed in the local community and the local culture, because these dojo founders will welcome everyone and potentially send a car to the airport to pick you up, help you figure out which Airbnb or furnished flat that you could stay at, and obviously and probably enroll your kids in the dojo. And it'll be like having a local friend there and a host really welcoming you versus just being a tourist. So for me, that's going to solve a big problem with all the research and not knowing anyone on the ground. That is going to make me feel much more comfortable to go to a new place. But basically I do a bit of research before I go to a new place. I book what I can, like in a week we're going to be in Barcelona, so I'm in the evening and watching Netflix or whatever, I'm watching YouTube videos about like where to go in Barcelona, what to eat, visiting Vlad in Mallorca. So that's what I do. I typically just kind of do a little research before heading to a country about what I want to do there, where we want to stay, and then obviously we'll be visiting the dojos and really meeting like the local families there, and that tends to help me a great deal. So I hope I helped answer Daphne's question.
Just very briefly, I'd like to point out that please, as you work on your accommodation, of course, that's one of our biggest expenses, is where we're going to live. And we work out our kids' schooling, and we work out our, if a nanny's going to travel with you, and your bags and your laptops and all those things. Do what it takes to get your mental health in the right place. Get a program for access to counseling, for coaching, for being able to move through things. And as you're on this journey, you may witness traumatic things. You may have relational things that need tune-ups. And I just encourage everyone to take care of your mind, because it's a terrible thing to waste. I just couldn't resist that. No, it's a terrible thing not to care for. And I know we're losing people just because we've carried on. We've just gone not past the top of the hour. But some health plans, including ours, even our travel policies, come with unlimited mental health. And that's multilingual, whether it's Italian or French or German and other languages, Spanish, Portuguese, etc. Or if you just go to a Headspace type program to where you can get mental health and make sure your kids have access to it, to a program that has folks who know what a third culture kid is, or a globally mobile scenario versus just someone sitting in some province or state that has never traveled giving that care. There's some International Therapist Directory has a great resource also for those who know and understand the globally mobile. But just wanted to touch on that. That's a crucial thing in this lifestyle logistically, to make sure you're taking care of yourself and your kids' mental health.
Thank you, Andrew. Actually, this is a topic that I'm definitely going to be looking into with your insurance, because one of my girls has ADHD. And so, there's a little bit of anxiety, and we just started, it took months to finally talk to a therapist, and then we're leaving the country again. So, and we can't access them because they're based here and they can't cover us when we're abroad. So we would love to find an international therapist that could help her with her ADHD issue. So I will definitely be reaching out to you. Thank you. Yeah, and Kate, thank you so much. That's such a great synopsis. And if I could add, if your children are 8 years old and up, enroll them in Galileo so they can have a consistent world-class self-directed education, and hopefully the opportunity to visit our local dojos, which some of them do take younger kids. I forgot to mention that to Daphne, but she's gone. But yeah, I would love to, I can stay a little bit longer if anyone wants to come up on stage and ask any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. I think another interesting topic will be to discuss about your project, which is the co-living thing. I'd like to,
Yes.
I'd like to explore that subject as well. So I know it's late now. I also have to go. Thank you so much for putting this together. But yeah, if there is any follow-up on this, I'd love to join. So thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. And Andrew, by the way, I'd like to follow up because maybe we also can discuss about insurance in our dojos. Yeah, maybe we can get in touch with this. After this, and discuss about this possible
I'll reach
partnership.
out to Andrew about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate, Lizz, Vlad, and all those who have joined us today. This has been wonderful. Kate, let's definitely on the next event, let's talk about the future of workation, the family workation. And guys, follow everyone who's here, look at the folks in the rooms, and until next time, thank you each. I know Lizz will be hanging around to answer questions, so
Bye.
It's been wonderful. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah, if anyone has a question for us, we can stay a little bit longer or not. Very flexible about that. Kate, if anyone's raising their hand, could you bring them up on stage? Thank you, Kate, for being such a great moderator and inviting us to join. Bye.